2, 1. Boom. There we go. We're live. Today, I have the great pleasure of bringing on Wayne Butterfield, who I've known for some time now, and really excited. We've been lining this one up. And Wayne, it's great to have you on today, sir.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, we have known each other a little while. I was just saying, for anyone who has seen Tom's early broadcasts, they would have been done from his parents' dining room, which was the best background ever. It looked like he was doing this from a pub. So I'm a little disappointed that he's in a much more normal background this time. But yeah, great to be here, Tom, chatting to you and with the audience as well. So.
Yeah, man, really appreciate it. I didn't know which one of us was going to bring that up to start with, but it's something that we'll have to do it again. It's going to bring into the conversation. But yeah, always trying to bring the colourful background whenever I can back into it. So we'll have to do it on the next one, Wayne, which will be a lot of fun. But for people that don't know you then, so we've done some interesting, I did your podcast as well, which is really exciting, and really appreciate you having me on, which is great. And I've seen that you've been doing loads of really interesting people, some of which I want to bring onto mine as well. But maybe for people that haven't come across you, that are watching now or on the recording, maybe just give a bit of background to what you're doing at the moment, Wayne. And I don't know if I've asked you this actually as well, like how you got into this space which you're now excelling at. Like I see all your LinkedIn posts, everything. Was it by luck? Was it by chance? Was it something you've always had a passion for? Tell us your story, man.
Okay, so for everybody else's benefit that doesn't know me, so I'm Wayne Butterfield. I work for an American company called ISG. Clearly, I'm very British, but I now live in Texas, and have done for just over the last year. My background is actually, I grew up in the contact center, and I got into automation and transformation probably about 12, 13, 14 years ago. So as I say, I originally started off in the contact center and had various different roles at companies like Telefonica, British, and BT, British Telecom, for anyone who's not familiar. And some of that was about automation, some of it was about digitization. And I really got a passion for driving operational efficiency.
Yeah, nice.
And although I don't have a technology background, I figured that technology really is the enabler. Now, it's not the only thing that you need to be thinking about, but technology is an enabler for us to do things better, faster, cheaper. And in about 2010 is when this really kind of clicked for me, when having previously managed process improvement initiatives and transformation of our back office at Telefonica, I got to a point where, with the help of my sourcing team and with the help of our outsourcing partners, we basically sweated the human asset as much as we could.
Yeah.
We'd gone through every process. We'd reviewed the keystrokes. We'd really looked at what more we could do. We, looked and see whether or not we could improve any of these processes. We looked at whether they were even needed. And we'd made some decent headway, right? We'd saved some headcount. We'd saved some money. But there was still, 367 people sat in a low-cost location doing transactional type activity that we needed to do, right? It wasn't expensive enough for us to change core systems, but it also wasn't cheap enough for us not to be worried about it. There was monthly invoices in the millions that we would get from our outsourcing providers. That adds up. So there had to be a different way. And I'm not kidding. I stumbled across a technology type called RPA. It wasn't actually called RPA back then. For anyone who's not aware, it was called Operational Agility Software. Clearly, the marketeers had not got their hands on it at that point. And in 2010, I signed my first contract with one of the pioneers in the industry, Blue Prism. And that really was the catalyst of me making that jump from, we can improve processes, we can, be a process improvement team, we can improve a process and drive some efficiency. But if we really want to change the way that work is done, if we really want to transform, we have to use technology. And that was it, 2010. So we're nearly 13 years down the line.
Yeah.
And it's still what drives me right now.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. It's awesome to see how people get into it, because I say my background, I've when people ask me, it's like engineering, and I wasn't even properly an engineer. I was a marketer for an engineering company. I was head of marketing, and it was very that's very similar to you. I saw this technology, and I was just like, what the hell is this? Like, how does this, like, I haven't been exposed to it before for one reason or another. And I mean, a lot of people that haven't been exposed to it, especially with automation, like you said, Blue Prism and being pioneering in it, and RPA or being coined in 2012, was it? I was having that conversation with Ralph, who I think you also know as well, briefly, about how that came about. But have you seen, do you reckon there's like been any years, Wayne, that have really shifted how it's been adopted? Because like the pandemic shifted a lot of digital transformation initiatives. Was there something that you've seen that really got people thinking through your various roles or with ISG that thought, shit, we need to adopt this, like this is going to be the next thing? Were there certain periods that you saw that shift, or certain milestones? I don't know if that's a good question.
Yeah, well, it's funny because it went from, if I kind of give you like a bit of a timeline as I remember, and I might get some of the dates wrong, so I apologize to people if I do. But so I started in 2010, and then probably by about 2013, I was kind of a reference site for a number of different organizations to come and see some of the work that we're doing. So again, 9 years ago, and there was people like Paul Donaldson, who again, a lot of people should know from the industry. He's at Automation Anywhere now. We had some of the team who were at Sutherland. So David Brain, Ian Barkin, etc., who set up Symphony, James Hall, who set up Gen 4. These were all people who, again, saw similar things to what I did, very different backgrounds, but saw the value that this technology could bring over traditional outsourcing. So then what happened in 2013-14 is you started to see these pure play organizations grow up. And when I started, at least in 2010, there were no experts because we were really at the cutting edge. When we say we're at the cutting edge, I was the first 5 customers. And this was a tiny, tiny industry at the time. So people just weren't, like, as a big consultancy, you wouldn't be interested in providing services for these type of technologies because there's no revenue to be made at that point. But people like Ian, people like James, they saw something in the technology, and so they created, Symphony, Gen 4, etc. So that was, it feels like to me, and again, this is a long time ago now, it feels like 2013, 2014 is when things started to happen. A little bit. I used to start going into conferences. I remember my first time, I think, in a conference was about 2015. I was the only person talking about this type of technology, and I had a load of tech enthusiasts basically being naysayers at the time. I think I did my first conference in the US in 2016 in Florida at the SSON event over in Florida. Nice. And again, that's actually when I first met the guys at ISG Automation, because again, Blue Prism had moved this industry towards the US. Now they were starting to gain some interest there, but again, the industry grew as a result of these consultancies who were providing the services. And you'd have an Automation Anywhere, you'd have a Blue Prism providing the technology, but you needed people to help implement at that point at least. And so that was kind of a catalyst, 2016, 2017, when I think it became a little bit more mainstream. But still, even now, 5 years on from that, the latest polls and surveys that I've seen, and Heather King posted one the other day on LinkedIn, and it still said that 35% of organizations that they had surveyed has still had 0 bots in production. That's kind of 1 in 3 organizations, even in 2022, on that survey at least. So, but I think certainly the pandemic helped. I say helped. It did 2 things, right? It either stopped those who hadn't invested or accelerated those that had. And I'd say probably 2021-ish, maybe 2020, I think it was a realization that RPA alone was not a transformational tool on its own, and that actually this role of intelligent automation the replication of human characteristics by using multiple technologies was one of the way forwards, at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a single day, but if I think about the different things, the consulting, the growth of the consulting side of this, the continued advertisement of this technology type by the analysts. I'm trying to think when the first analyst report probably was. And clearly, Horses for Sources and Phil First were the first people to talk about this. I remember 2012, I think it was. Phil, apologies if the dates are wrong. Yeah. When he coined the term or the place Robotistan, and he was talking about the work I was doing at O2 at the time. This new destination for outsourcing. So, and he's had a number of different articles since then. Again, building up on that. So yeah, there's loads of dates and time frames, but for me at least, it's felt like a really, really slow bubble. Yeah. Because I feel like I was on that train so much earlier than everybody else, and I was born, 2016 when I joined ISG. Yeah. I was like, guys, I'm conscious that everybody else is really enthusiastic about this RPA technology. I've done it for the last 5 years. I want to be concentrating on conversational AI. I want to be concentrating on machine learning, not OCR, but intelligent document processing. What can we do with NLP? Where are we going to go into process mining, task mining? My head was already kind of thinking that in 2016 when I joined ISG.
Love that.
But still, we're still talking a lot about RPA. I think everyone is now a bit more mindful of everything else on top of RPA, which is great.
Yeah.
But even now, there's just so much opportunity for us to work in different ways, and I think that's the thing that we need to kind of figure out now is how can we work in different ways? How can we recreate our processes with technology in mind versus people at the center? So plenty more runway for us in that consulting business and for organizations to be more efficient. Absolutely.
Yeah. I definitely see that from AI journal perspective as well. Like, I'm not in the field, I'm not a practitioner, and I don't deploy projects and don't have expertise. And I think I've got a long track ahead of me and a lot more learning I'll have to do around that before I get to the same level as certain people. But I'd like to know what you think, Wayne, because I've heard people with an RPA bubble or something very similar and thinking we're already, and I am seeing it, whether it is or isn't correct. I am seeing people say, well, you're buying licenses and you don't need RPA, like it's not the right time for you, you're not big enough, or whatever the reason might be, or you haven't, and not even that you don't need them, it's you haven't got the right strategy for it, and you haven't thought about how much hiring you have to do, how much it's going to actually cost you compared to something, to what else might be available, like if you go to someone like Workato or something. What would you say to the whole idea of there being not an RPA bubble, but a kind of explosion that's kind of nearing? Well, are you buying it for the right reasons? Are you bringing it on for the right reasons?
Mm-hmm. So I think the key thing to think about is that I don't see RPA as a technology.
That's how I see it.
Obviously I do to a degree, but I see it as a capability, right? And I think if you look at it like that, this movement of low code, no code technology to drive operational efficiency. If you look at RPA through that lens, then I really don't see that there is a bubble. Now, if you think about it through the lens of just pure technology, then there are horror stories out there, but there are as many good, solid user cases, organizations that have got tremendous value out of this type of technology, without a doubt. I think it's a lot easier to drive value in organizations that are just dripping with people. It is a really hard slog for organizations that are a lot smaller to create really meaningful business cases. I mean, we shouldn't underestimate how difficult it is for organizations that are, smaller in nature and also just don't have big operational teams. I mean, as much as we can talk about, there's this odd case in marketing that'd be really good, and we've got these good user cases in sales, and sometimes you find some stuff in IT. Unless you have a larger operational team who are doing a lot of transactional type activities, then RPA can be really a big slog. And I've seen it time and time again. Now, that's because we're trying to use, or are using, the technology, I think, to replicate pretty much what we do at the moment. And most processes are not set up in a way that a robot should be able to just do.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that is, I underestimated myself as well is, when I first started out on this journey, I think there was a lot more process improvement across my organization that could have happened that would have removed some of the waste that we ended up automating. Now, that's, I say it's been a decade since. Organizations never stand still, right? So whether it's adopting RPA or process improvement, just about every organization I've ever worked in, and pretty much most that I work with, will have some kind of operational efficiency target. Now, whether they use the technology to do that, whether they're upgrading their internal core systems, whether they are adding additional capabilities online so that you can do self-serve. Like, an organization doesn't stand still and twiddle their thumbs and think, well, I'm going to wait for this RPA technology to come along, and then we're going to start, driving operational efficiency. There are so many competing things in an organization that are all after driving this better, faster, cheaper mentality, right? And so the more mature an organization gets in understanding its processes, in its operational excellence capabilities, the more all of that happens, the more self-serve capabilities that happen, the more calls that are deflected into other channels, the less opportunity there actually is for simple transactional activities to be automated using things like RPA. And that leaves, and we see this a lot with conversational AI as well. When you take all the simple stuff out, you just get left with all the complex problem solving or serious types of conversations that require skills like empathy as opposed to speed. And so, it's not really a surprise. Now, do I think there's a bubble? I think there is, like outsourcing, it came before it. There is an amount of work that is ripe for automation, that is ripe for RPA type automation. But you don't outsource your entire business. Very rarely do you outsource everything. So you shouldn't expect to be able to automate everything, at least not for, decades, if ever. The human skills of, being human, empathetic, etc., are, incredibly difficult to ever automate. And I don't think most organizations ever would want to get rid of those meaningful, powerful conversations and ability to interact with their clients at their, when they are at their most vulnerable, their most annoyed. It's like those moments, if you get those moments right, then you, even if it's a bad situation that you turn good, that is a very powerful thing. And you ain't going to get that ordinarily with automation. I mean, most of the time it's because automation has failed. That you even have those opportunities to put a person in front of your customer. So I struggle to think, and I saw a stat earlier on today that the RPA software business in 2020 was 2 billion, and in 2028 it will be 13.4 billion, I think. And I guess this is just license sales. I'm not sure that there is going to be this continued growth of this software unless there are significant changes to the way that we process work, understand work, and complete change management in the background. I just don't see. So I don't think that's a bubble bursting. I think it's this kind of leveling off, perhaps. And unless there's a big injection of complementary technologies, then the RPA only bubble is, and may even has certainly leveled off in my view, and I think it's the complementary technologies that continue to expand the usefulness of that as a technology type.
I love it, Wayne. There's a lot I agree with there, and there's a lot, there's real good points, because I always look at it as well. The reason I was smiling is when you mentioned about RPA being a capability, I look at, and it's just my personal view, so I could understand it better. I see all technology as a capability, and people are like, oh, and I'm just like, well, AI is a capability. I know it encompasses ML and lots of other different things, and ML ops and whatever you might want to associate with it. But I just see it as a capability, and that doesn't mean it can always be capable of something, but it means it needs the right structure, it needs the right training, it needs the right spend, it needs the right strategy behind it. And that always, when people say define it to, I'm like, stop looking at it as a product, like a physical thing. Look at it as something that can advance you or can take you, but also bring you back as well. It's capable of bringing you back if it's not leveraged properly. Like, capability can mean good or bad. Look at it like it's a bottle or something, like it's not inanimate. It adapts, which I've always, for me at least, it really helped me understand how, like you're saying about RPA, and I think there's areas where it is used. I'm very fond of, and I think to your point as well, for the next question, because I want to look at hyper-automation, see what you think there as well. But with RPA in particular, like you said, there's areas where people are licensing it where I prefer usage-based. And I think there's a company which I love, Robocorp, and I'm always very honest and transparent. I love their model, regardless of whether I love the technology. I don't know, I know the technology, but I don't know it enough. And I just think, like Slack, I like Slack because it's like usage-based. And I think that's such a pro. Anything where I see it's usage-based, I think that's what I'm going to go and use. And I think there's that coming to the RPA scene as well, about it leveling out, which I think is a great point you made, Wayne. But I want to know what you think about, if someone came to you and asked you, Wayne, what's the difference between things like RPA, intelligent automation, and hyper automation? How would you respond to that and separating them? Because I had someone ask me, and I was just like, well, A, I'm not the best person, but B, I know someone that I'm interviewing soon that I'd love to ask that question to. So how would you say even look at it as three separate terms and comparing them, or would you look at it a different way?
So I always like a definition, right? Because I think that really helps organizations and people. Like, I hate just being thrown a term and not really understanding or being able to explain it. So in early kind of mid 2020 is probably when I first defined, at least we call it Wayne's World internally. So Wayne's World's view of what RPA, intelligent automation, hyper automation is. Right, RPA, single technology. Very good at replicating transactional type activities, needs structured data, and whether you're me or Kieran Gilmurray, I call it handwork. Right, it just replicates the handwork. No thought needed. It's the type of stuff you can do when you're hungover. Maybe don't even have to look at your screen. And certainly when I've been in a lot of my Indian call centers historically, when I've been over there, it's just you can tell when handwork is happening because you can hear the drum of the keyboard and the mouse clicks. When you've got thousands of people all doing similar tasks, you can hear it, right? So handwork. That's
the typey clickety. I remember when you were first mentoring or schooling me on it, Wayne, alongside Kieran. I think it was something like that. You were like, well, Kieran.
He calls it clickety click. He calls it clickety click, which obviously says it much better. My Leeds accent doesn't quite as pretty as what Kieran can say. He calls it clickety click. I call it handwork, right? Same thing. And then he would call intelligent automation the thinkety think, and I would call it headwork. So clickety click, thinkety think. Handwork, headwork. And if you think about, again, this is intelligent automation. Think about your head, right? You've got your eyes, you've got your ears. It's where, you've got your brain. It's where how you communicate more often than not. You have all of these things, these capabilities that you use when you're doing work, right? You're looking at something, you're reading something, you're interpreting it, you're understanding it, you're making a decision. All of these things, you're not doing blindly with your hands, you're doing it with your head. Intelligent automation, for me, is replicating your eyes using OCR, intelligent document processing, machine vision, depending on how far down that complexity scale you want to get. Your ability to make decisions. So, machine learning, automated decision making, if you don't want to go down the ML route, deep learning, if you really have some incredibly complex decisions to be making. I think anything to do with natural language. So we'll keep natural language processing and conversational AI kind of together. So the ability to converse or the ability to read, understand, or generate anything to do with language.
Yeah.
And if you add all of those things together, plus the ability to transact, that's intelligent automation, right? For me, it's still the automation of work, but it's more than just the simple transactional stuff.
Yeah.
Hyper automation. Okay. This was a term that Gartner defined. I think it was in 2020.
Yeah.
And when I first heard it, I'll be really honest, I was like, what on earth is hyper automation? And why are we confusing people with another term? And then and the reason it really annoyed me is because everybody at the time was saying hyper automation was just loads of RPA. And I was like, loads of RPA is not hyper automation. It's lots of RPA.
Okay.
Hyper automation, I don't think, is lots of intelligent automation.
Yeah.
Hyper automation is more a state that your organization is in.
Like being agile or something.
Yeah, it's one where I think you have an automated way of understanding work at a data level.
Yeah.
So you have a pipeline of activity, a layer of understanding that is created by things like task mining, process mining, conversations mining. Okay, you're no longer relying on people to tell you what they do. You now have an intrinsic understanding across your business of how and what work is being done, because you are monitoring every event and every click that happens on screen and every conversation that happens across your organization. You now know in your data, labeled data even, what on earth is going in your organization. And so you're making strategic decisions around what you automate, how you automate, and more importantly, because you have data here, you have technology here, underneath, the outcomes can also be tracked, because you see, because this is a constant cycle, it's why it's constantly hypering round. The value that you create is also shown in data. Yeah. And so you're able to compare before, after, track all of that, see change. And it's this big loop. And that, for me, is what hyper-automation is. The ability to understand work at a data level, automate it using technologies, and then track the value that you are creating, using data. And then you throw in things like, workflow and intelligent workflow and loads of other technologies, orchestration, so that, your bots, whether they're conversational, whether they're RPA, are monitored. It's a more robust way. It's a strategic way, actually, of delivering automation, as opposed to the tactical way of, we've got 7 bots in finance, 3 over here in HR, and we're just talking to the guys over in marketing about something that they want to do about automating a spreadsheet. It's like, okay, there's this, which is where you may start, and then there's this, which is where, in theory, we want to try and get to. And hyper automation, may in the end be replaced, truly by updates to core systems, to APIs, etc. But it's a journey, right? Hyper automation is a journey, and you've got to get on that train at some point. And I think that, like we talk about organizations who are AI first, you can, through the use of hyper automation, be data first and automation first, as well as AI first. Like it's putting technology at the heart of how you transact. And I think that, for me, is where the definition, it's a long-winded definition, but I think it kind of hopefully brings to life the difference between having a few technologies that you automate stuff with versus it being a strategic way of how your organization is run.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like that's going to I'm going to turn that into its own sound clip, into its own video clips. That was a very good definition. It was very, I still like to be refreshed on it, because sometimes I get lost in hearing other people's definitions. It's like, AI, I see 1,000 different definitions, and I'm just like, Tom, just look at it as a capability. And that's a really good way of looking at it. And I want to ask, Wayne, have you seen, any conferences you've been to, or anything, or any events or anything that you've been to or involved with? Have you seen another term that you've recently come across that you quite like the idea of? I heard of one called interoperability. So have you come across any that you like, or maybe even question, just thinking, God, here we go, here's another term? But
well, I can tell you one term I don't like, which is hyper intelligent automation. I'm just like, now we're really getting into the realms of adding confusion to the mix. I don't know if there's any new terms that I like. Now, what I might find, mate, is because next week I'm at a couple of conferences in Vegas. The week after, I'm at conferences in Vegas. You're lucky. I've literally been here a year, and I've pretty much been in these four walls. As anyone that has seen me recorded on anything, will notice and recognize this exact background, because it feels like I have not left this particular office. It's true. I've been to one conference in the last couple of years. Two, actually. I was in one in London.
You're at the one a few weeks back in end of June, was it? I saw you there.
Yeah, it was. What was it? AI something or other. AI? Yeah, AI. Yeah. So I was over there, but again, I didn't speak. I didn't hear anything that was new at the time, or anything that I took away. I remember, to be fair, in 2019, I think it was, going to somewhere like I think it was IBM Think in Vegas, and I'm sure it was Amy Webb, who's actually at Southwest, talking about blockchain. It was at the time. I think she's a great speaker, yeah, that kind of like, that was the last time I think I went to a conference where I left with my mind worrying about how or what this technology could do to change the way that things happen. And I guess I get a little disappointed about how slow we are actually to adopt a lot of these technologies. I always get really bullish when I'm in a conference and you hear somebody talk about it, and then the realities of getting back into an organization and trying to make this type of meaningful change just drains me, if I'm completely honest. So I don't know, maybe if we were having this in another couple of weeks, then after I'm at Forward 5 as an insurance tech conference, as the SSOW event. So there's like 3 different conferences I'm at in the next couple of weeks. So maybe there'll be something more that comes out.
Yeah, I'll be messaging you saying, "Wait, come on, tell me everything. I need to hear it. What rubbish have you heard, and what great ideas have you heard?" So I'd say more things. But so I want to be conscious of your time as well, Wayne. I've noticed that you're doing these things on LinkedIn, the automation days or days of automation. Sorry.
Yeah.
Where you got like 200,000 views, I saw, and you got like more than 200,000 views.
Oh yeah.
Going through it. How did it all start? Where did this idea come from? Was it a challenge, or did you think, screw it, this is what I need to do? I need to help people. Where did it come from?
So I listen to a lot of podcasts when I run. So the thing I'm doing after this, before my next meeting, is I'm going to go out for a run. I listen to podcasts while I do it.
Love it.
Mainly because I just, if I'm listening to a podcast, it takes away the pain of running, especially in 100-degree heat of Texas, right? So anything to stop me from thinking about the pain I'm putting my body through is a good thing.
Yeah.
And so having I was listening to a podcast, and somebody had done something similar in the world of AI, where they had started asking a question a day on their website, I think it was. And I thought, what a great idea to start asking a question a day, tagging a load of friends and experts that I've met over the years, and just getting their opinions. We're on day 50, I can't remember if it's 52 or 53 of 100 days. And yeah, it's just, I get audience asking, messaging me, asking, me whether I can ask certain questions. And yeah, it's just a good way of getting people's opinions, their thoughts, and a good debate going around some of the things that people just want to ask in the industry. I mean, yesterday's question was about, where did all the automation evangelists go?
Yeah.
And that stemmed from a post that, again, Paul Donson he wrote in about 2018, 2019, he said something along the lines of like, where did they all come from?
Yeah.
So they got popped up from somewhere, these evangelists. And then I was thinking the other day, I was like, where did they all go?
Yeah.
Now, I know where some of them went. I know where some of them went because certain companies went public and other things, and you know, they made their book, right? So I know where some of them went.
For you. Yeah, Wayne's going to start finding you out.
But there was a lot more that were talking about, you know, this and had it in the job title, you know, that, what they were. And I very, very rarely now do you ever see even like an AI evangelist, an RPA evangelist, an automation evangelist. You just don't see that term being used anymore. But it was hot, you know, 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was yesterday's question. Today's the difference between a chatbot and conversational AI. So, you know, it's that they really differ. They're across the entire intelligent automation, across the entire hyper automation. Actually, they're across the entire thing. A lot of them are asked by the audience to me. They'll message me if anyone's got any interesting questions that they would be interested in getting opinions of. Then yeah, feel free to let me know. Thanks for bringing it up, mate.
No, I love it because I saw it. And another thing I liked about it that you're doing, Wayne, which I don't know if I do or don't, I always question if I am, but I always think I want to ask those questions which certain people might laugh at you for, because I think, well, my job running the AI journal is the whole reason I got into it, because I didn't understand it. I was prepared to have that humility. And I love that's what you're saying, and they're not in that exact way, but I think you have a line and every time you ask it saying, please ask. There's no right or wrong answer, which I really love, because I say that's why I'm obsessed with scientists, or more recently with their agendas, because they never really look at something like, am I right or wrong? It's just why, or is it? I love that approach, Wayne. It's a real great way of encouraging people to say, look, there's no ask these questions, because if you don't know the answer, we're probably going to unlock something, and we probably teach you something, or you might become a customer, or you might become a partner or something, or you might go on to create a business if you understand these. A lot of opportunities from it. Do you reckon you've got a favorite one that you've seen so far, or one that stood out? Has there been one, or maybe a few, like that one you just mentioned, over 52 days, 53 days, whatever you're at?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there's so many good ones, right? I love reading the comments. The difficulty of it is being and like having the time to read everything. I mean, some of them blow up, and it's so difficult to continue to read and respond and all of that. I don't know if there's any in particular ones that were that great, or that stand out. What is a bot? Like, that's a good one. Again, it's the most basic questions that we ask ourselves, and I like it when it's contextualized. So there's something that's happened, and so we ask a question about it. You know, that's the type of thing that I really like. So you know, that for me is that was a good one. You know, what is a bot? And then you get all of these people asking these different, having these different opinions. Because, you know, it's a really difficult thing to define. I love it. The questions I like best probably are the ones where you're asking people to define. And then you get like a little bit of conflict between, well, this is how I define. Because there is, again, you mentioned before, there is no right and wrong answer here, right? It's about, this entire industry is built on acronyms and people's definitions, but they can all be different. Like, different people can have, you know, my definition of hyper automation may completely conflict with Gartner's original vision or the source's view of what it is. But it's kind of, this is how I've interpreted it, and it's all about interpretation, right? And I always think that's you know, value is another thing, right? It's always in the eye of the beholder. So I think it's you know, a good way of, you know, people being able to provide their opinions in a safe environment, but not just provide their opinions, absorb, you know, and then be able to be more informed to make their own opinions, right? That's the other thing that I think is really valuable out of this is there is, you know, there are a lot of people that make comments and add likes, etc. But there are thousands and tens of thousands of views, and it means that people are hopefully having a good read and seeing what people are saying, and then being able to take that back into their own businesses and just be more informed. You know, have a maybe it's starting to have debates and raising questions in their own organizations, and that's kind of that would be fantastic if that type of thing is happening as a result of something that just happened on the back of me listening to a podcast while I'm running.
That's awesome. I always call what do I call it when you're listening to a podcast? I call it net time, so no extra time. So it's something you're doing anyway, and you can listen. And I found out the best way you can digest that when I cycle, because I can't run like running, so I cycle instead because I'm not a big fan of it. But it's whatever you fancy, and I think that's a great way of interpreting it on how to get these points across, Wayne, which is really helpful. I've got a question I'd like to ask, and I'd like to know what you think. As a final question, and because I had this conversation with the CEO of Expert AI a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying around voice technology, he was saying it's all about context. And we spoke to another company that we did the live with about a month ago, and they handle like all the interactions with like the NHS and like emergency lines, and they said context is key. But I feel like I've gone off the wrong track. But with what I want to ask is, do you think with all these new technologies, and well, not new, but advancements, what do you think the next job role is going to be in automation? Because I had this question, and I think it's going to be something like a sales solutions engineer or something that can truly understand the company's problem. But he was saying something maybe like an extension from a data developer, which I think progressed from being a data miner and then it turned into data developer. I think it's data developer or data scientist, and then progressed into something else. Do you think there's a job title that's going to be around in 5 years when we next chat? It's like, where did that job title come from?
I definitely think that there is, and unfortunately, the name I put to this is not even that sexy, which is I'm disappointed at now, having heard all the data miner, and I'm like, okay. So and this is not even new, right? In 2019, I think I wrote a few things and I did a few engagements around the contact center of the future. Now, most contact centers are predominantly voice. I think even now, and I've done my best to digitize the hell out of these things for years, but voice still, for most organizations, is still king. And so call centers, the automation of voice contacts, and the role that I still saw, back then and still see now as one that probably grows is at the moment I'm calling it the exception handler. Yeah. And the reason being is there's going to be very rarely, as soon as you get to some kind of complexity, are you going to get 100% straight through all of the time, right? So, those organizations that are going to be really successful in the future with automation and while delivering exceptional service are going to be those that can amalgamate their digital workforce with their human workforce. And the best way of being able to do that is to have non-technical experts who are experts in process and processing, looking at everything that the automation is unable to do. And first of all, resolving that for the customer, but then improving the automations. And this could be an RPA, but I'm thinking more likely going on your voice track, it's a voice bot, a conversational AI. It might be some retraining of some NLP if it was like an email response or something like that. So you are resolving that customer query because in theory you are very people focused, but your role then is to say, well, really, how do we stop that query from coming in? What can we do to improve the technology that we are putting in front of our customers so that they don't have to go through that particular journey next time, that they can have their query resolved by the automation, as long as that's relevant, right? And that's not for every query, and clearly there are certain things, and all you have to do is you put things like emotion detection in your call handling software, and you can see that someone's upset. Well, then it automatically routes to a person, right? It's like, this person is upset. The last thing you want to be doing is X, Y, and Z. Now, again, this is all, where the technology is maneuvering us towards. But that role of, I'm not a technologist, I'm not a developer per se, historically at least, I am an SME, I am very customer centric. My role is to be empathetic, to understand your problem and to problem solve. But on the flip side of that, it's how do I make sure the automation, the journey that person has gone through is being optimized on a regular basis. And I think that is a role that I very much see. And it's not just a small, number. I see this as, an entire team, an entire department across an organization. And we currently we do have people who look at exceptions, but they're all focused at the moment predominantly on the automation technology, not necessarily on the resolution. And so I think there's that type of role. I think in the world of automation is one that I would think. I need to think of a better name though. Exception. How about you? I'm an exception handler. It's probably not the best one. Maybe a wrangler, an exception wrangler. Maybe that's it. I'll bring a bit of Texas into it.
Yeah, I like that. I have to think about what words we can bring in, like new words into a savvy exception. Yeah, I don't know, a savvy exceptional handle or something. It's I feel like we're going to come up with some names over the next few weeks. When you come back to these conferences, Wayne, I'll have a lot to ask you on what new titles and what new things. But Wayne, I really appreciate you coming on, man. Really appreciate you sharing all the details. And as ever, always learn something new from you. So I'm really excited to do this again in the future and hopefully catch you in person at one of these events coming up. We're trying to go to more in America next year. So
mate. Yeah, I will hopefully see you in Austin in March. So anybody else who's at Southwest, let us know.
Yeah, definitely talk around all these kind of topics while we're there. But Wayne, really appreciate having you on, mate. Looking forward to the next one. And to everyone who joined us either now or on the recording, appreciate your time and looking forward to the next one. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.